Right. The latest reading on job openings indicates there are still plenty of opportunities in the job market.
There were 8.9 million open jobs on the last day of January. The Labor Department's Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey suggests demand for labor remains robust, though job openings have moderated from a record 12 million in 2022. The number is still much higher now than before the onset of the pandemic in 2020. The number of people quitting jobs fell slightly to 3.4 million. Fewer people quitting is a sign of the job market softening.
Fox's Ginny Casola. Wall Street ended in positive territory after Fed Chair Jerome Powell told Congress he expects to cut interest rates this year. The Dow plus 75, the Nasdaq gained 91, the S&P adding 26. I'm Lisa Lacera. This is Fox News.
Hello, everyone. This is Lawrence Sutton. This is the Lawrence County Republican Party. And thank you for the Republican Party for sponsoring us. And also want to put a shout out to Travis Caldwell with United Country Southern Middle Tennessee Realty. United Country Southern Middle Tennessee Realty say that they have found Bigfoot, and I'm telling you, it's Travis Caldwell, all the way from Polk County, Florida. Travis has been stomping around these parts looking for property, looking for places to sell, and also looking for maybe even your next property to buy. You can contact Travis at 931-629-3033. As good as guys you will ever want to meet. Good family man, good Christian man, great county commissioner. We're very blessed in this community to have Travis Caldwell. Next, I want to talk about Chris Stutz with Farm Service Solutions. Chris can be reached at 931-242-7675 or farmservicesolutions.com. Chris, if I'm going to tell you guys, if you are looking for something for your farm and Farm Service Solutions doesn't have it, you probably don't need it. Had a buddy of mine this week looking for a 16 kilowatt PTO generator. And what that does is it allows your tractor to run a generator to help your house with its electricity needs should the power go out. Well, I'm going to tell you something. The price that I saw was half the price of what I've seen on other generators that are in that 14 to 16 kilowatt range. I was amazed the price of this. So give Chris Stutz a call if you need anything that you can think of, even if it's not your typical what you need on your farm. You never know what he has. So it's Farm Service Solutions. Chris Stutz, 931-242-7675. So today with me today is Dave Vance. Dave Vance is a true American patriot here of Tennessee. He is the chairman of Stewart County Republican Party. And I'm just going to tell you, Dave has numerous hats. And how are you doing, Dave?
Doing okay. I do appreciate the kudos. Let's not go overboard, though.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. If anybody deserves kudos in this state, it is you, Dave. I just feel blessed to have you in my life and the things that you have done in the background that people of Tennessee do not realize in keeping our legislators under check and keeping our freedoms going in this state. And just want to tell you how much I appreciate you for all you've done and also for coming on with me today because Brandon Taylor is out sick today.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate all the kind words. I make an effort. I don't know how successful I am, but I do make an effort to do some of those things you talked about.
Yes, sir, you do. I want to hit it really hard right out the gate. Give us a update because you are the one that has really turned me on to the the 10th Amendment and how important the 10th Amendment is, and how we have a couple of bills going on right now that is just so incredibly important to our state and our freedom from a tyrannical federal government?
Well, I'll back up here and I guess kind of start at the beginning. Actually, last year, Representative Halsey and Senator Bowling, they had basically a nullification. It's titled the Nullification and Restoring State Sovereignty Through Nullification Act. And last year, the House bill, which at the time was 0726, and the Senate bill, I think 1092, this House bill was going through, it made it through one committee, and then the Senate bill made no progress, and so essentially it kind of killed it for last year. Well, once we found out that, and I say we, me and a friend of mine, she lives in East Tennessee, a lady named Karen Bracken, once we found out that they were going to run this bill again, we really feel that this is one of the most important bills in the legislature. We decided, okay, look, there's not enough people that understand nullification, understand state sovereignty, and they really don't understand how important this is to us, especially with what's going on with the federal government and how out of control it is. So she set up a website. We basically started a little organization called Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty, and to educate people about the issue and to inform them about the bill. And actually, last year, Representative Halsey gave a great explanation, a great history lesson in the committee on this bill and why it was important. And that's actually on our website. You can go to the website and learn a whole lot about nullification, learn a whole lot about 10th Amendment and just the Constitution in general at tncss.weebly.com. Anyway, in a nutshell, let's talk about the concept of nullification. A lot of people hear nullification and they think secession. So let me tell you right up front, nullification and secession are not the same thing, okay? They're just flat out not the same thing. If you think back to our founding, after we had won the American Revolution, and from about 1781 until 1787, so that encompasses the time from Yorktown, a little prior to Yorktown is when the Articles of Confederation were passed. Now, the colonies, they were basically declared themselves states, and they were independent, and they formed what was called the Articles of Confederation. So they maintained their independence, but they basically said, okay, we have this Articles of Confederation. We are going to work together towards liberating ourselves from England. And so you have the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and on that treaty, if you look at the paperwork, it identifies all of the states as independent states, okay? So we were not a nation. We were 13 independent states. Well, it turns out that the Articles of Confederation had some weaknesses that were, by 1787, it wasn't, a lot of the founders were not sure that this country was going to last. And so they realized there were some things that needed to be done. Originally, they had the Constitutional Convention just to make some adjustments, amendments to the existing Articles of Confederation. They made a determination that they could not amend that document as it was written, and they created another document, although there were a lot of characteristics that were carried over. And so with the Constitution, after it was written, a lot of the people, when it was written and the convention had voted on it, okay, now these were people sent from their states to this convention, but this was not the Congress acting under the Articles of Confederation, but these were people that were sent from their states. And when it was all said and done, you had some people that are like, wait a minute, we just created the monster we left. And they had some serious concerns. So you hear the terms Federalist, and not as much, but very significant, the term Anti-Federalist.
Correct.
The Federalists were people that supported the Constitution as proposed. And the Constitution as proposed certainly created a more powerful and effective federal government, it's actually partially federal, partially national, than what they had under Articles of Confederation. And so there were people who opposed it. Even some of the people who went all the way through the convention, people like George Mason and others, are like, I can't sign on to this. I just feel we're going to create a federal government that's too powerful. And so he and other anti-federalists, including Patrick Henry, who was not at the convention, but he was very concerned about what was coming out of it. They wanted a Bill of Rights added. It didn't get added at the end of the convention. But when the ratification process started, and this is important too, so under the Articles of Confederation, to make any changes, all 13 had to agree. Well, with this new Constitution, they decided, well, we don't know how many of the states are going to agree to this, and it's only going to be binding on the states that do agree to it. And they came up with a number of 9. If 9 states agree, then these 9 states will be in this new government. And so they did get their 9 eventually, but the only way certain key states ratified it, and you may have heard of the Federalist Papers. Federalist Papers were anonymously written at the time by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton. And they basically were answering the concerns and the fears of the anti-federalist, who said the government was going to be too powerful. It was going to overtake the states. They called it consolidation, and that basically meant, okay, the states would be, they would just be totally inferior to the federal government, and, our rights could be, trodden over at any whim of the federal government.
You mean kind of like what's been going on over the last probably 80 years?
Yeah, something along those lines. Actually, something along those lines. It's interesting, too. All of the clauses that they cited, necessary and proper clause, general welfare clause, the supremacy clause, those were the exact clauses that the anti-federalists were worried would be abused.
Right.
So in order to get ratification for key states like Virginia, and especially the Federalist Papers were actually written to get ratification passed in New York, okay, because that was also a key state. And so they did get it ratified. When it was all said and done, in order to get key states to agree to ratify, Madison had to agree that in the first in the first Congress, that he would take up the Bill of Rights. So they would take amendments. Now, I don't remember the total number of amendments they received. It was some crazy amount. We ended up with 10, which are known as the Bill of Rights. Okay, and one of the hesitations of the Federalists for giving a Bill of Rights was like, wait a minute, if we list something. If we list some things and don't list other things, then somebody can misconstrue that. But we're telling you, this document gives no power to the federal government to do the things you are concerned that it's going to do. When it's all said and done, we still end up with a Bill of Rights because enough states were concerned it was going to create too powerful a federal government. And matter of fact, some of the states in their ratification documents basically said, hey, if this goes south, we're out of here, okay? We're not going to go along with this. We're retaining all of our sovereignty. So if you look in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it lists the enumerated powers of the federal government.
And I believe there's 18 of them. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's 18, but there's actually a little more than that when you start looking at things like impeachment and certain other things, okay? But primarily, there's those 18, all right? Now, necessary and proper clause is related to those enumerated powers because some of those powers they had under the Articles of Confederation, but they didn't have any stated power to enact those laws. So it's kind of like if I give you the responsibility to do something, here, you got the responsibility to do this, but you don't have the authority. Well, you can't accomplish anything if you don't have the authority. So that's really what the necessary and proper clause was intended to do. And the supremacy clause does not say that the federal government is supreme. It said laws of the United States, it says the Constitution and laws made in pursuance thereof, okay, not just any federal law, all right? So it has to be the Constitution and laws made in pursuance thereof. That's what's supreme, not just the whim of the federal government.
Is that kind of what's going on right now in Texas?
Well, that's a result, in my opinion, of this extreme and insane idea that the federal government has the final say.
Right.
And
it does not.
No, it does. I mean, it does and it can't. I mean, the states, they only gave up. They gave the powers up. Let me back up. They delegated those powers.
Right.
They delegated those powers as sovereign entities to the federal government to do certain things. So remember, the states, they created the federal government. The Constitution is not a compact between the federal government and the states. It was the federal government. The Constitution was a compact through the states that created the federal government with specific things and limited and specific things, enumerated things that they wanted them to do, okay?
Right.
Not just a carte blanche to do whatever you want. And so like I say, we ended up out of that fear, we ended up with the Bill of Rights, and specifically the 9th and 10th Amendments kind of reinforced that point that, hey, look, whatever we did not give up, we retained. We are the states and or the people. And matter of fact, the 9th Amendment makes reference to, it says something to the effect of, and I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, powers, they still retain powers that are not enumerated, because if it's not delegated to the federal government, if it's not prohibited to the states, which Article 1, Section 10 lists the things that states cannot do, if it's not delegated to the federal government, restricted to the states, then the people retain all those powers. So any powers that you can conjure up in your mind belong to the states and to the people, not to the federal government. And the 9th and 10th are kind of like reinforcing the fact that the powers are enumerated, that they're limited and defined, which, like I say, that was a whole argument made by the Federalist Papers, as well as explaining how the federal government was going to work overall and what the purposes of it were. And so when you ignore the 9th and 10th Amendment, to take just the supremacy clause, misread it, and ignore the 9th and 10th, ignore the fact that originally the Bill of Rights for restrictions just on the federal government, not on the state governments, okay? Because the states had their own constitutions. They weren't worried about the state level, although Madison was. They were worried about the federal government. So that's what we had. Now, of course, along comes the Civil War, and the 14th Amendment does get passed, but guess what? The 14th Amendment did not make the 9th and 10th Amendment moot. And it did not give the federal government, other than that limited scope, and there's confusion about what that limited scope of the 14th Amendment was, because guess what? We hear now that it's pretty much the first 8 amendments to the Bill of Rights, but that's not the way the courts treated it for like the first 50 or 60 years, okay? Most of the problems we have in our country, in my opinion, I mean, obviously we have a huge moral issue,
right.
Lack of morals, lack of, we've gotten way away from the Bible. We're not guided by the Bible as we were. And remember, even though we were never meant to be a theocracy, I think it was even John Adams, who was a strong Federalist, actually almost a monarchist, that said that the Constitution is made for a religious and moral people and it's unfit for any other. So we do have that issue, but I think the other issue that has really put us in this bind is all this deference to the federal government. Because if you just take a couple phrases out of the Constitution, if you think about it, what you're doing is you're making the federal government God. You're making the federal government the one that determines what your rights are.
That's what our churches have done starting back in the 60s under Johnson, under the 501c3 Act, giving churches the ability to be nonprofit. They basically have deferred to the federal government as their supreme ruler instead of God himself. Absolutely, and
I think all churches should have a big ceremony where they come together and they burn their 501c3s.
Amen. You need to repeat that. I've never said it like that, but that's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, I think they should do that, and I think the sooner the better. And here's the thing too: a lot of it's a bluff that I'm aware of, since that was passed. I don't know that any church has ever lost their 501c3. And so I'm not so sure how much of that was a legitimate threat by the government, or how much of it was some preachers just use as an excuse not to talk about controversial things because maybe they just didn't want to run off their big tithers. I mean, it's hard enough to find people that tithe. You know, some of them might not want to offend those who do. So, hey, we'll just keep it on the Bible, and we won't talk about anything that might be misconstrued as political in any way, shape, or form, no matter what's going on in our country.
But you know what? Here's the thing. You know, we had the Black Robe Regiment.
Yep.
You know, and the shot heard around the world was actually fired by a pastor with his with his people from his church that were trying to hold off the British government that had actually came in to take away weapons.
Yep, absolutely. So let me get back on track here. I know I kind of went to get a little history lesson, but I think it's kind of necessary people understand that originally it was a limited government. Now, understand this too. From early on, there was always this division. You had the Federalists who wanted a strong central government. And in fact, the first plan presented at the Constitutional Convention, known as the Virginia Plan, was a top-down plan. It was federal government gets to veto state legislation they don't like. And they were basically told, pound sand, we're not doing that, okay? But it's just like, you know, just because you win a political battle doesn't mean those people necessarily go away. And understand that not all the people who were Federalists were bad by any means. Some of them had different, you know, Madison's thought was, well, because of the limited application of federal power, he was still worried that the states would abuse people's civil rights, and he wanted the federal government to prevent that.
Right.
But that's not what the majority wanted. So what we came out with when it was all said and done was limited powers, enumerated powers, Article 1, Section 8, and then you come out with the Bill of Rights, and everything else that was not delegated was supposed to remain with the states. But we've constantly had this battle throughout our history in terms of people who would go back and read that document and, you know, kind of pick and choose and highlight. You had the Marshall Court, John Marshall. He was a big Federalist. He pushed that on the court. The court got out of line early on, as did the federal government. I mean, the Bill of Rights was finally adopted in 1791. So we actually had the Constitution in effect by 1788, I believe. And then the Bill of Rights ratified by all the states by 1791. Well, by the late 1790s, you had the Alien and Sedition Acts under the Adams administration. One of the founding fathers, John Adams. Blatant violation of the First Amendment because he wanted to make it a criminal offense, and people were prosecuted. And people did pay fines, and I think some were put in jail for speaking out against the government, speaking out against the president, speaking out against certain members of his cabinet. Now, Jefferson was excluded from that because they didn't like Jefferson, so they excluded him from, you know, you can criticize him if you want, but you had that just a few years after. And so even our founding fathers, when they get put in power, some of them abuse that power. And so that was an early lesson. And so you had the Alien Sedition Act. The other part of the Sedition Act was, the alien portion of it was that the president himself could decide if a certain alien needed to be, you know, booted out of the country. Well, now we got a president that wants every alien from everywhere in the country. Yeah,
over 10 million over the last 3 years alone.
Right. But I do want to point out something about that, too. If you look in the Constitution, the only thing it says in regard to immigration, it talks about naturalization. Uniform laws of naturalization. Congress is supposed to come up with the laws for naturalization. Naturalization and immigration are not the same thing, okay? Because people did not think of themselves so much in those days as a citizen of the U.S. They thought of themselves as a citizen of whatever state. And that really carried through all the way up to the Civil War. I mean, a lot of people that may have been pro-union really probably had more to do with where they were at in a lot of times.
Right.
Than necessarily beliefs in certain things. But that kind of varies. I don't want to go down the Civil War rabbit hole other than to say nullification is not secession. So we've always had this tension, but certainly in the last 100 years, we've allowed the federal government to be the final word. And all because, well, the federal government said so. The court said so. 5-4 Supreme Court decisions say things like, well, your local school district, they can't pray there. Or, you have to allow abortion in your state. Or you have to, wipe out thousands of years of history and normalcy and say, now you got to let two flaming faggots get married. And that's garbage. But because we have bowed to the federal government, when you decide that you're going to allow the federal government to be the final word, you just made the federal government God. That's why we're in the mess we're in, I think, and to a great degree. Now, you don't buck the federal government on things that are legitimate powers of the federal government. Okay? It's laid out there. But that's not a problem. That's not been a problem for a good bit of our history. Okay? But to defer to them, Texas is in that bind because they deferred. In other words, standing up somewhat, but I'm sure you caught the part where the court said that they couldn't take the wire, or that they had to let the Biden administration take the wire down.
Correct, which they haven't gone and done yet, have they?
Right. Fortunately, Texas didn't go along with that. Okay, I was glad to see that. Well, on the 5th, the new law in Texas was supposed to take effect that Texas could start arresting illegals. And there was a hold put on that by the Supreme Court. Originally, there was a federal court, a local federal court, the district court, I think, in Austin. And then the 5th Circuit reversed the lower federal court. But then the other day, Alito, surprisingly, the Supreme Court basically delayed Texas from arresting anybody under their new law for 8 days. Now, I typically think there's only 2 justices on the Supreme Court worth anything, and that's Thomas and Alito, but I totally disagree. 8 days. How many thousands of people are coming over in 8 days? How many potential terrorists are coming over in 8 days?
They're averaging 1,000 a day right now, are they not?
Something like that, at least that, probably more in some places. Plus, Texas was having some success with not taking the barriers down. A lot of illegals were starting to go to Arizona and California,
right?
And the numbers were slowing down in Texas. Well, I bet you they're picking back up now that they know, hey, well, they said they can't arrest us. So I'm sure we're going to have more. Well, and this is one of those cases where, in my opinion, the state of Texas is saying, okay, we hear you, Supreme Court, and we're not doing that. We're going to do what we need to do to protect ourselves. Like I said, other than the issue of naturalization, you won't find anything in the Constitution about the federal government's responsibility on immigration. You won't find it. Okay, you will find, if you look in our history, you will find Supreme Court precedent. Yes, you will find laws passed as early as 1790 having to do with immigration. But there's nothing in the Constitution that makes the federal government the final word on it, certainly not to the degree where a state has to surrender its sovereignty and allow itself to be invaded by a federally led invasion.
Well, I know this. I was very pleased to see that we're sending another 50 of our National Guard to the border. I think we already had 125 there currently, correct?
I know there was 125 at one time, and I saw that 50, but I think I saw today or yesterday where the numbers going is actually going to be 300, which I think I'm all for sending 3,000 as long as they're going there to do something to actually keep people from coming into the country. Right. I don't want them to go there and do anything that facilitates them coming here. I want to keep them out. I don't want to facilitate them coming in.
No, absolutely not. And it's kind of funny that Brandon's oldest son, Greg Taylor,
right? He
actually volunteered to go, and he is going to be the top medic from Tennessee, from my understanding, going there.
Oh, wow, that's great. That is great.
So, he wasn't called in. Greg, which is Brandon's oldest son, he he actually volunteered. I believe Greg is 20 now. He might be 21. But
Wow.
Greg actually stepped up and he volunteered to go.
Right.
And
I want to hit, if I can, I know it's going to take a little bit of time here. I do want to hit on the bill some.
yes,
But I want to, the new bill number, for the House bill by Representative Halsey is $27.95, and the Senate bill is $27.75. The House bill, we're hearing it's going to be heard next week, but we don't have a date yet. However, the Senate bill is scheduled for Tuesday in the Senate and the State and Local Government Committee. So, I mean, that's the 12th. We need people before then. We need them calling, emailing. We need to make people understand that we need this to get through. Last year in the Senate committee, it got a motion, but did not get a second. So we need to get a motion, a second, and we need to get everybody. If we can get a motion and a second, at least we can get the committee on record.
right. And now, which committee is that again?
State and Local Government Committee, Senate.
State. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. Our senator here in Lawrence County is on that committee, Paige Wally.
Yeah, and my senator's on there too, Senator Stevens, and I'll be sending another email and making another call in reference to that, and encouraging others to do the same thing. We also have on there, let's see, Senator Jackson, Ed Jackson. Senator Pody, which Senator Pody's one of the good guys. He's the one who made the motion last time. Senator Briggs is the chairman. He'll certainly need some calls. Senator Yeager will need some calls. There's a couple of Democrats on there. And then there's Senator Lowe, who has a competing bill that I really don't want to go into at this point. But that is really, to me, one of the most important pieces of legislation that's going to be heard this year. But I want to hit a few things from the actual bill, Representative Halsey. And like I say, he did a great job presenting this in committee last year. And Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of Tennessee, all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. And in Section 2, the government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. We, the people, ordained the Constitution of the United States. The people in the states granted only specific, limited powers to the federal government. And basically, we maintained everything else. But here's the deal. The Constitution is not self-enforcing. You know, it's a paper barrier if it's not enforced. Well, if the federal government enforces it when they think that you have violated something that is their power. Well, who do you think is supposed to enforce the Constitution when the federal government is violated? It's the state governments. The state governments are the most important if they will do their job. They are the most important in terms of protecting our freedoms, our liberties, our rights. But if they feel like, if they have this crazy idea that, well, we can only defend the rights and powers that the rights of the people, the freedom of the people, and the powers of the state, if we can only do that when the federal government says we can, I mean, that's insane. But that's the game we've been playing, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. And I'll tell you what, the situation in Texas, I'm glad we're helping out with that, okay? But every state's a border state now, and there's all these other issues, all these other problems with our federal government. I don't know why our state and other states have not figured out, look, we've got to push back. We've got to stand up. And I hope that they will, because to be honest with you, it's going to take divine intervention and state intervention if we're going to have a chance.
I agree with you 100% on that one. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of that. We have a gentleman between me and where you live at in Centerville that is facing 11 years in prison just for going and praying outside of an abortion clinic in Mount Juliet.
Good Lord.
I mean, and this is being federally prosecuted underneath this obscure law that was written during the Clinton administration called the FACE Act.
Right.
And I just tell you, when you see this, and I mean, just look at what they're trying to do with Donald Trump. I mean, I've been on this radio program numerous times. I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a big Trump fan by any means. I think he's done a lot of things wrong. But when I look at how they have gone after this man, what they have done is just not right.
No, well, look at the people, the J6 people. I mean, you want to talk?
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to talk about an example of unconstitutional actions? And I've not heard our state step up on this.
No,
I haven't even heard hardly anybody from our federal delegation say much about this. Our state should be all over this. Why do we have 27 people that were there at J6? Why are they in prison? Why have they not had a trial? I mean, this is Soviet type garbage, and we're not hearing anything out of our state. And now, are there some people that maybe, and I don't know all the cases, there may have been some people that did something that deserves punishment, but guess what? They still have rights.
Maybe, yeah, but we're talking about probation. We're not talking about. You know, I'm tired of the left always talking about, oh, it was an insurrection. I don't know of any insurrection that doesn't include weapons. Do you?
No, that is such a pathetic joke to call it an insurrection. That would be the most incompetent insurrection ever.
I mean, I'm going to tell you something. I mean, there were more people hurt when the White House was attacked, when they were trying to climb over the fences of the White House.
Right.
There were more police hurt during that incident. And you know what, Dave? There wasn't one person arrested for that.
That's
because
right.
it did not fit their narrative.
Did not fit the narrative. And I'm going to tell you what, the insurrection that we need to worry about is the insurrection of the federal government against the Constitution and against us. Whether you're talking about the courts, whether you're talking about three-letter unconstitutional agencies, or whatever branch. That's the insurrection that's happened over, especially the last 100 years, although its roots go further back than that. Now, here's the thing about this nullification legislation. If you read it, it's like 12 pages. It lays out a lot of good historical points, basically reinforcing some of the things I'm saying and then adding a lot more, and they're saying it a whole lot better, by the way. But I want to just hit what it actually does. Section 9, state nullification of federal action, and that's only unconstitutional federal action, may be accomplished in any of the following ways. The governor, made by the governor's own executive authority, issue an executive order nullifying the same, whereby all executive departments of the state are bound by said order. Now, that's just the governor controlling the executive department, which he already does. There's already quite a few limits in our state constitution on the governor, okay? Our state constitution set up a weak executive, not a strong executive. So I know somebody told me, well, I don't want to give the governor that much power. Well, unfortunately, we give him a lot more influence than that already in a lot of ways, but our state can keep him in check on this, all right? So that's not something I'm per se concerned about. Number one, certainly the current one wouldn't have enough backbone to do anything. Any member of the General Assembly may introduce a bill of nullification in the Assembly, and for any proposed bill of nullification, the bill is not subject to debate or passage in committees, which is important because a lot of good legislation dies in committees, but this goes directly to the floor of each house, and they must give the members notice of 5 legislative days that the bill is scheduled. So basically, you bring something up, a legislator thinks, hey, this is something that we need to nullify. It's going to get a floor vote on the House, get a floor vote on the Senate. Now, there's nothing guaranteeing that they're going to agree with the guy, okay? I mean,
well, there's nothing. You're right on that, Dave. But you know what? I want people to understand this is not something new that Tennessee's looking to do. They actually did this in 2021.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But if I could, let me hit these other 3 points, and then I want to come back. People need to understand that point that you brought up. And then the other one Any court operating under authority of the Constitution of Tennessee may render a finding or holding of nullification in any case in which it otherwise has proper venue and jurisdiction, wherein the parties to said case will, upon final judgment, be bound thereby. And then any combination of 10 counties and municipalities may, through the action of the executive or through the action of a majority of the governing legislative body, submit a petition. And these all fall under the same category in terms of they have to be heard on the floor. They don't go to committee to die. And then the last one is the signed petition of 2,000 registered voters of the state may submit signed petitions of nullification to the Speaker of the House. Same deal, it has to get a vote. Now, no bill, rarely does a bill, when it's submitted, make it all the way out in its initial form. Okay, it's kind of like a battle plan. All right,
right.
Things change after the first contact, but I think it's a great start, and it gives multiple avenues to include the people, because a lot of times I think our legislators are hesitant to do these kind of things because some lawyer inevitably will tell them, well, the federal government is supreme in all it does. And the Supreme Court says so it's got to be true. And so things won't happen. But we can't continue on. We are on the road. We are on the super highway to hell right now.
We're on the road of destruction, absolutely.
What's that?
I said we're on the road to destruction, absolutely. I mean, we are modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, make no mistake.
Right. And this, in terms of, from the political aspect and the constitutional, not the spiritual, this has to happen. We cannot fix our country. And look, you mentioned Trump. Okay, I don't have either variation of TDS, which is Trump derangement syndrome.
Right.
I don't have the variation that, he's the worst thing that ever happened to our country and everything he does is wrong and I hate everything. No, I don't have that. I also don't have the, oh man, Trump, just turn my brain off and don't think it. Anything he says and does is fine. No, I don't have that either. Okay. He irritates me on a regular basis, and it's not on petty things. Okay.
Right.
It's not just a comment he made or a mean tweet.
Oh no, I mean, he actually 95% or more of the things he tweets out that he gets a lot of flack for, me and you would happily say it in public if we had his platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe we might change a word or two here and there just for public consumption, but, maybe not. Now, I want to go back to the point you brought up because it's very important that people understand, because especially people that might be hearing this for the first time, they're like, there's no way they're going to do that. And, I don't know that this is going to pass. I know it needs to pass.
They've already done this, though.
Well, here's the deal. They are on record in 2021, October 2021, during one of the special sessions, during all the COVID scamdemic garbage. They did a resolution, and this was a joint resolution 9005. Okay, in the Senate, the person leading the resolution was McNally, Lieutenant Governor McNally. And I'll defer to I'll abstain from my normal references to him. But anyway,
right.
He did it, and then Sexton, Speaker of the House, joint resolution. Well, they didn't write it. I don't know who wrote the thing, and they didn't write it, but it pointed out all the historical things, some of the things I mentioned about the fact that the federal government has limited and enumerated powers. The states retained everything they did not delegate. It even mentioned the fact that our elected officials, our senators and our reps, take an oath to support the state and the federal Constitution. They have the right and the responsibility to nullify unconstitutional federal action. They were basically putting the federal government on notice, hey, you push too far on this, we will nullify it. Oh, by the way, we are not limited to going to the court. And I was shocked to see that. It was great to see that. And so the thing is, most of the people in our House and in our Senate, including my senator and your senator, signed that thing. Matter of fact, one or two of them, if not both, were co-sponsors.
Well, I was about to say, Paige Wally, I know for a fact, was a co-sponsor of that legislation, because I have talked to Paige about this, and I've talked to Paige about Janice Bowling's bill, and I'm like, hey, I want you to sign off on this. I want you to be a co-sponsor. I will tell you this, Joey Hensley has signed on to Janice Bowling's bill. He is now a co-sponsor on that bill.
Yep, Yep, and we need more. But
yes,
here, the point is, they have already said they believe they have the right and the responsibility to nullify unconstitutional federal action, regardless of what it may be, whether it's an executive order, whether it's court, whatever. They've already said that. They basically already said they agree with me. I know that would make their stomachs churn for most of them, but they have already agreed to what I'm saying. Now, they've done a resolution. What the bill will do will actually give it teeth. You know, one of the problems with a lot of the laws in Tennessee, it's a lot of the laws in Tennessee are as toothless as the bums downtown Nashville. Okay?
Right.
And we really need to put some teeth in the 10th here in Tennessee, and I think this bill is what will do it. Now, it doesn't guarantee anything's going to get nullified. Understand that. It's not like we pass it and we're going to nullify anything, but another great feature of this bill is it's not limited to future violations. We can take violations from the past and nullify them.
And that's what I really like, and I have been discussing that as well.
Yeah, because we can't leave a lot of the things that have happened that they put on us. We can't just continue. It's kind of like the situation with the illegals. You know, you hear the Trump administration talking now about, okay, if he wins, then, you know, mass deportations, which I am all for. I mean, you can hire some bounty hunters and get that done in no time. Sign me up, okay? But because you can't afford to leave all those people here. You know, you can't just secure the border and leave all the people that have come in over the last 3 years here. You can't do that. Well, we can't leave all of the bad precedents and all the bad regulations and all the bad decisions and all of that the federal government has put on us certainly the last 60 years, and continue on and actually be a free country, okay? And have it and actually follow our Constitution in any way, shape, meaningful shape, way, or form without addressing some of these past issues.
You know, where you said earlier that how every state is now a border state. I don't know if you've seen this, but the National Guard and the state police have been called in by New York for their subway system because they have, in the last year, have had a 45% rise in violent crimes on the subway.
Yep.
Have you seen that? I mean, that right there is amazing that we're having that type of crime. I mean, Philadelphia right now, Philadelphia is going through a huge, rise in crime. And I'm going to tell you something, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have had people come in here unfettered and they are doing what they were doing in their own country. But now they have a lot more opportunity to partake in crime because, a lot of our large cities have defunded their police. So now we have less chance of being caught and we have more opportunity to get more things.
Absolutely. And it's a mess. It's only going to get worse if the states don't step up and retake their powers. And we're not asking for a civil war. We're saying, look, follow the Constitution. When all else fails, read the instructions. Stop considering the government as God.
Actually, the 10th Amendment, if it is exercised properly, is the political version of the Second Amendment.
Absolutely, because guess what? In the end, it will be 10 or it will be 2 on some level. And I'll tell you what.
I'd much rather be 10.
10 is much better for everybody.
Yes.
It is much better for, and don't get me wrong, there are some people in certain levels of government, some people in government that have well earned a Second Amendment solution, but we are still better off with the 10th Amendment. But the states, it's like I said, it's not a self-enforcing deal. The states have to enforce it.
You know what's kind of funny? I love the fact when right after Biden was elected, he made this comment that, talking about patriots that were against what he was doing. And he says, well, you know what? He goes, you can't fight jets.
Right.
But I tell you what's funny. Well, yeah, you left all the jets in Afghanistan, so why are we worried about you? And I guess the Afghanis could fight jets, but the American people can't? Is that what he's saying?
I guess. I mean, I hope that we can avoid
Absolutely.
those type of things, because it's better. It is better for all. Now, here's what I'm going to say too.
Well, hang on real quick, Dave. The reason I brought that up is because I want people to understand that it is not what I consider people like you or me who are patriots of this country that are talking violence in this hogwash, but it's actually the left that is, and your Democrats that are saying they're wanting to be the ones to pick the fight.
Yeah, and they want us to do the first actions so that they can have the federal government come clamping down on us, and of course then they'll say, well, see, that's how all those right wingers are, how all those conservatives are, how all those Christian nationalists are. I guess that's the latest term for us.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I mean, but it would be a disaster. It would be a disaster, and but the states can avoid it if they can get some backbone and stick to it. Because think about it, the federal government can't operate without the cooperation of the states. Just think, what can they actually do without the cooperation of the states?
Well, they have to have the cooperation of the states, period, end of story.
Which also means for all the stuff we're enduring and have endured, our states have been complicit. And so as much as our states complain about the federal government and overreaching and so on and so forth, well, they've been complicit with it. You're either resisting or you're complicit. And our state, just like every other state, is complicit on some level. And it's time to stop being complicit. It's time to start pushing back. And like I say, they can't function without the states.
Well, I'm going to tell you, people have got to get out to vote. I mean, the voting that we had for Super Tuesday was dismal. I mean, our vote, it was down 20% from.
I've not seen those numbers, but I do want to say something. Number one, everybody knows in Tennessee that Trump's going to win. Although there were other races involved, I got that.
Right.
One thing here on Trump. I'm not convinced that they won't cheat him out of it again. I hope they don't. I'm not convinced that, if they don't cheat him out of it, that they won't decide, hey, all we really need to do is cheat enough in the House and the Senate. We can let Trump win and then we can get rid of him right away, or we can make him null and void right away. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about whatever things they might do during election time to create chaos. So we know that's coming. But here's the deal. Let's say we get Trump, and let's say we at least have one of the the House or Senate, or somehow we get both. Trump at best, and this is not against Trump, this no matter who it is, Trump is a tourniquet for the problems we have.
Right.
Okay, he's going to be there 4 years. He can only do so much. If we don't use that time he's in to work at our state level, to get our state to start pushing back and stop being complicit, well, when his 4 years are up, whoever else, what other swamp creature will take back over, and we'll be back in the same boat. So Trump, a lot of people seem to have this attitude. There's one thing I hate about election season, and I hate about this other form of TDS, is people have it in their mind. It's almost like a drive-through. I'm going to go make my order, and then I'm going to go to the drive-through. I'm going to order a double MAGA, and I'm going to go pick it up, and everything is going to be fixed because Trump is going to fix it for me. That's almost the mentality of a lot of people.
Right. Right.
And that's not going to get it. If we get him in there and we get at least have one house, either have House or Senate, if we don't use that time to get our states straight, and if to have them keeping the feds in line, then it'll be wasted. It'll be all we will have done is delayed our destruction. That's all we'll have done.
Well, Dave, I'm going to tell you, fastest hour in radio. We have 1 minute left. I just want to bring up a couple of things before we go. Thank you so much for explaining this to us, Dave. Want to let everybody know, please look at Travis Coswell with United Country Southern Realty. If you need a house or you're looking to sell your house or your land, Travis is the man you need to talk to. 931-629-3033. And then Chris Stutz with Farm Service Solutions. Not a better guy around, not a better place to get your farm equipment. Farm Service Solution, Chris Stutz, 931-242-7675. Dave, thank you again so much. I want to say this real quick. Minnesota had 19% of the people go to the polls and say, we want anybody but Biden.
This is
Same with Michigan with the Democratic Party. 13% over 100,000 people said anybody but Biden
of Prospect
as a
Communications.
Democrat.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Alexa?
The
Rich Eisen Show.
Hey, we got a problem in
Here's a
Tennessee.
station you might
we
like.
had at-large delegates for Trump. We're finding out
This
that a
is
bunch
the
of the
Rich
at-large
Eisen Show.
delegates for Trump
This
are
is
not
one of the most
bona fide
shocking
Republicans.
turns of a career
That
in the
issue's
20
going to be
plus
dealt
years
with,
that
all
I
right? But
have
just
been
people wanted me
covering
to
this
understand
issue.
From the
we have
Rich
a
Eisen
bunch
Show
of the
studio
at-large
in
delegates
Los
that are
Angeles.
not bona
Is
fide.
Russell Wilson going to turn into a
You'll hear more on
journalist?
that in
Today's
the very near
guest.
future.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that on Monday. All right, everybody, we got to go. Thank you, and God bless Tennessee, and God bless Lawrence County. Goodbye.
NBA veteran
Thank you.
Rex Chapman.